Thursday, and today is a beautiful day here in New York, although a little cloudy. And I have a busy day ahead with lots of meetings, the most interesting of which will be on mind and brain today with some experts in the area of neuroscience and neuroplasticity and epigenetics. So I thought today's question was very interesting, and it comes from Duck Duck Bear Bear. And Duck Duck Bear Bear says, I'm very interested in this hard problem of consciousness and will be reading and learning more. I'm particularly interested in the question of free will. I was hoping to find more in Chapter 9 about the consciousness of non-human living beings as well, such as primates, rodents, C. elegans, and model organisms studied today in the physical brain sciences. Though I could only find examples on humans. From growing up with a dog and being around other animals, I can say that they certainly experience moods or emotions and sometimes behave randomly. Do living organisms in bodies have free will independent of the field of consciousness we all live in? It seems to be a precondition of being conscious. I'm particularly interested in this question, remembering with deep sadness that today is the 18th anniversary of the shootings of Columbine High School. I'm reminded of how much work needs to be done to increase consciousness on a national and global level. And if everything comes from the same consciousness, how do we handle the imbalance that feeds into these tragedies, and how do we hold individuals accountable for their actions in this regard after determining that they do have free will? So there are so many questions and so many thoughts in that, and I'll do my best to explain that. So first of all, consciousness, once again, and I'm using Rupert Spira's definition right now, is that in which all experience occurs, in which all experience is known, and out of which all experience is made. We can also say consciousness is the basis of all experience. You can't have an experience in the absence of consciousness. But Spira is going a little further. He's saying that experience is made out of consciousness. So hearing, tasting, smelling, seeing, touching, and the experiences thereof are modifications of consciousness. In that sense, mind, body, universe are all consciousness and its modifications. Now, interesting question is being raised these days. Will computers ever be conscious? And a lot of people do say that computers, especially as we move into the age of quantum computers, they will all be conscious, and artificial intelligence will take over. There will be augmented intelligence, on and on. And there are some truths to all these claims. Although consciousness is subjective experience, I don't think can be had in an artificial intelligence system unless it's an augmented system which is linked to human consciousness or the consciousness of a living being. So what I'm going to do is read to you a little section from the book, from the chapter which is entitled, Does the Brain Create the Mind? And I'm only going to read you a very small section which is on page 189 of this book. You are the universe, discovering your cosmic self and why it matters. So here we go. 5 reasons computers are mindless. Number 1, minds think, computers massage digits. Number 2, minds understand concepts, computers understand nothing. Number 3, minds worry, doubt, self-reflect, await insight. Minds have feelings. Computers spit out answers based on crunching numbers. Number 4, minds ask why, the question why. And computers ask nothing unless ordered to by someone with a mind. And lastly, the last point here, there are many more points with the last point here, minds navigate through the world by having experiences. Computers have no subjective experiences. They run software, nothing more, nothing less. So that should kind of convince you that computers are sophisticated calculating machines, but they do have these days what are called feedback loops, and therefore there are self-learning artificial intelligence endeavors happening, and that will always happen. And I do see a future for what we call augmented reality, an extension of our consciousness, where there'll be a combination of human consciousness and cyborgs. Now, the question of free will is a very interesting question, because the simplest answer is that 99.999% of humans exercise no free will. And this is because they're conditioned by past experience, and they're also conditioned into interpreting that experience because of the hypnosis of the conditioning itself. The hypnosis of the conditioning itself. So 99.99% of humans do not behave as if they have free will. They are bundles of conditioned reflexes and nerves that are constantly being triggered by people and circumstance into very predictable outcomes. Ask yourself right now, if somebody abused you physically, emotionally, would you react with anger and vengeance and resentment? If the answer is yes, then you are not exercising free will. Ask yourself, if somebody gave you immense flattery or praised you, would you not be flattered? If the answer is yes, then you're not exercising free will. So anytime you behave in a predictable manner because of your conditioning, and this conditioning goes back very deep, centuries of conditioning. In fact, every thought that we have is part of those centuries of human conditioning. So we can say that most people do not exercise free will. But once you start a practice of self-reflection, of transcendence, of body awareness, of awareness of space, of breath awareness, of mindful awareness of the five senses, of awareness of the viscera of your body, awareness of relationships, awareness of the web of existence, and also awareness of awareness. Once you get into a state which I like to call metacognition, observing ourselves having any experience, and also observing ourselves making choices in every moment. And once that becomes a spontaneous experience, then we have the state which I have been recently calling flow, effortless spontaneity in every moment of now. So that effortless spontaneity in every moment of now does not require anticipation of response. It is not burdened by memory. It is not burdened by regrets or resentment. It is being fully present and non-resistant to what is in every moment of now. Okay? So that's a state of joy, it's a state of flow, it's a state of effortlessness, it's a state in which we experience what is called the deep now. It is also an experience where the personal ego self kind of moves out of the way, and you feel you're an activity of the whole universe. In this state, by the way, there are infinite choices. And yet we can actually choose not to have any choice. We can choose to be in effortless spontaneity, where the right response to every situation comes to us as it happens. And so this is what the great teacher J. Krishnamurti called choiceless awareness. So now you have this interesting paradox. You have infinite choices, but you remain in choiceless awareness because you're allowing the universal consciousness or intelligence to flow through you in the trajectory of evolution and spontaneous creativity. This is the paradox, that we have infinite possibilities. We have gone beyond the clutches of karmic imprisonment. We know that there is choice in every moment, and yet we make a choice that seems to come unintentionally because it's not filtered by the conditioned mind. That's the paradox. Infinite possibilities and choiceless awareness at the same time. Erica says, choiceless awareness still needs an intention. Well, so subtle that you may not be aware of it. That intention is not your personal intention. It is the intention of the universal mind as it self-organizes, self-corrects, self-regulates, and evolves in the direction of creativity, love, joy, compassion, equanimity, and platonic truth, which is goodness, beauty, harmony, and everything that we yearn for at a deeper level, just happening by itself. So this is the paradox of free will. Ultimately, choiceless awareness in the midst of infinite possibilities. Now there are questions about these tragedies. Every day there are tragedies. We saw Manchester. I didn't realize that 18 years had gone by since the Columbine High School shootings, and so much has happened in between as well. So what about this whole idea of free will and responsibility for criminal actions? So in order to have a system of laws, of course, we have to have some kind of legal system to rectify what is harmful to society. But at the deepest level, we should also realize that most people who act in criminal ways are deeply conditioned through some kind of experience they've had as children. So, they've had a deep trauma or abuse as children, or they may be mentally unstable for various reasons: emotional abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, or maybe there's an illness. And a lot of people who do these heinous acts of criminality, they do not actually exercise free will at all, because they are so conditioned or mentally unstable or mentally ill, and they are actually in deep suffering themselves. So what is the right response to these people? I think out of compassion, the only right response would be some kind of treatment or rehabilitation, or definitely not having access to guns and other kind of other instruments of destruction, whether it's bombs or so on. So we do live in perilous times. Any unstable person can commit a crime or something like these heinous tragedies and that mentally unstable person, they can then identify with an organization, a stateless terrorist organization that has its own abused traumatic conditioning, and so, that is what we call evil. Evil is an imbalance in the evolutionary stream of consciousness or awareness. Now, you did mention other organisms, and do they have free will or not? By and large, they are basically conditioned to survive, so they have basic instincts for survival, which is an instinct for reproduction or sexual reproduction, an instinct for surviving through eating, an instinct of surviving by being a predator in the food chain. So in the food chain, every animal is a sentient being, but not necessarily self-reflective in the way you and I are, or some of us are. Most of us are not. Okay, so when we do not have any self-reflection, when we live the unexamined life, when we are not conscious of making our own choices, when we are not conscious of having a sensory or other experience, then we are just like that. There's no difference between us and another animal. In fact, the animal is better off because the animal doesn't mindlessly kill other animals. It does so as being part of the food chain. Now, there are examples of violence in chimpanzees and primates and all of that. So it's quite obvious that as we move from the reptilian brain into the experience of the emotional limbic brain and cortical brain, we develop this schizophrenic kind of behavior. On the one hand, we are proud to be intellectual and smart and rational. On the other hand, we are still bristling with emotions, and our reptilian brain is dominating. So we move between the evolutionary impulse and the destructive impulse that we call evil. So what is the cure for all this? I think the cure for all this is for us together to live our lives more consciously. The cure for all this is for us to engage with each other and help each other to make conscious choices. And the cure for all this is to also recognize that at the deepest level, in the deep now, all is inseparable, and that love is the ultimate truth at the heart of creation. As Rabindranath Tagore said, love is not a mere sentiment, love is the ultimate truth at the heart of all reality. So live with loving kindness, live with joy, let your joy spread out into the world, live with empathy, compassion, and see the context in which everything arises and subsides. Once you understand context, once you understand the meaning behind context, once you understand the web of relationship, it becomes difficult to judge, because you realize that everybody is doing the best they can from the level of awareness in which they are at this moment. And once there is less judgment, there is room for empathy, compassion, love, of course, but there's also room for creativity. So creativity is a gift that we have as human beings, and if we combine creativity with love and action, then we can indeed together, through a critical mass of shift in our personal identity, social identity, collective identity, we can help create a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, happier, and joyful world. That should be the goal. And if we don't do that, then we are only adding to the turbulence of the world, which is very turbulent right now. Okay, Christine Matteson says, does everyone have creativity? Definitely every human has creativity, and we are the most creative species on this planet. I have no idea about the infinite worlds that may exist, but our creativity is definitely here, and it can be both divine, but it can also be diabolical. It can be sacred, but it can also be profane. So now is the moment of choice. Okay, so Nita Rag Love says, your book is awe-inspiring. Thank you, that makes me feel good, and I really am very grateful for all the support you've given this book, and for continued conversations here on discoveringyourcosmicself.com. Okay, Marilyn says, I'm sharing your messages with my Venezuelan friends. My heart goes out to my Venezuelan friends, and I've been to Venezuela many times, and it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world, with some of the most beautiful people in the world. They're going through a very hard time right now. A lot of the world is going through a hard time. There are over 400,000 Syrian refugees in just the last few years, and a lot of them are children, and they're suffering. So let's ask, how do our actions every day, how do my actions every day influence what's happening in the world? I made a commitment not to be violent in any way whatsoever, to be constantly aware that I should not engage in any violence in thought, in word or deed, or in emotional outbursts. It gives me deep peace of mind, and then, it makes me feel that in some way I'm participating in decreasing the violence in the world. So I hope you can do that. Let's all make that commitment for being at peace and coming from there, always coming from peace. As the great European philosopher J. Muster said, there is no way to peace, peace is the way. And finally, last quote that comes to mind from Rumi, who says, why do you stay in prison when the door is wide open? Why do you stay in prison when the door is wide open? Let's exercise our freedom to choose and create a more joyful world. Thank you.